All right, so bearish runner, just like the bullish runner expecting the stock to go up, the bearish runner, we're anticipating, or the analysis has showed that typically after the earnings announcement, the stock, goes down in price. So that's similar to what we're saying here. Essentially, you're going to basically be buying a long put after the earnings announcement, and you're going to hold it, from 1 day to 20 days after the earnings announcement. Same scenario with the profit. We're looking to capture at least a 25% profit on the long put. But if you want to test it and go a little more aggressive to see if you can capture more profit, by all means, we would hope that you would do that and test it. Again, long put's the most optimal for the bearish runner because it can happen so quick. You can use other strategies like we mentioned before, but just make sure you're testing them. Naked calls, you could do that for the bearish runner because you're selling a call, looking to buy it back at a cheaper price if the stock price goes down. But when you're selling naked call options, it's always been said that in theory the stock can go to unlimited, or the stock can go to an infinite amount. So you always want to be careful when you're selling naked calls. Selling naked puts, like on the bullish runner, the stock in theory can only go to zero. Typically it doesn't go all the way to zero, but it can happen. So at least there your risk is somewhat defined. Whereas when you're selling naked calls, you have a stock like Tesla that could just keep going up and up and up, and then have stock splits and still go up and up and up. So you always want to be careful when you're selling those naked calls. But again, test it within Delphian, and that'll kind of help lead you in the right direction. Trade strategy here, besides the long call, now we're looking at a long put. Enter 1 day after the earnings announcement. 25% profit, 30 delta. We've kind of already discussed this earlier. And again, all these different factors within this section here are customizable by you. So if you find that there's a different strike selection model that might work better for you, you can always test it and implement it. Good candidates for this one is, instead of being 3% to the upside, we're looking for stocks that typically move more than -3% to the downside. So we're looking at, the first one I'm looking at is Square. So for the bearish runner, you can see Square, kind of went sideways here, but then sold off. Again, this is COVID. We're talking February, March. So that was, you can see that in the market as a whole. Here you can see the earnings announcement. So it gapped up before the earnings announcement and then sold off after earnings announcement. Same thing here. You can actually see that it actually spiked up pretty big after earnings, but then sold off. So interesting when you're looking at Square. Missed this one here. Bullish runner for Square. You can see earnings announcement. It kind of went sideways, maybe dropped down a little bit, but then kept the trend up higher. So this would be one that might have missed the boat on making a profit, but it might have when it had that little bitty dip, to the downside. Nope. We can see here May 7th. You can see that we lost money on that trade when it did pretty much just run sideways, which you could foresee happening if you're buying a put that's a 30 delta out of the money and the stock goes sideways. You're just going to lose money as time progresses on. 90% win rate with a 13.79 profit factor, $2,300 in profit over time. You can see the little charts there. The most optimal time frame for Square based on the back testing with this bearish runner trade is to enter after the earnings announcement and to get out 11 trading days afterwards. So again, don't hold this thing to 20 days because it could substantially decrease the profit that you're going to have on that trade when you do that. So just be aware of those days. Baidu is the next one that we're looking at. So Baidu, you can see Baidu earnings announcement, sold off, earnings announcement spiked up, sold off, gap down, and kind of went sideways and down. So we can see that Baidu is a pretty big one. And the reason I wanted to show Baidu is because you think of certain stocks, and I've mentioned Tesla before, but you think of certain stocks like Tesla or Baidu or Google or Amazon, and a lot of people just want to be bullish, those stocks because they hear about the big money that has been made, trading those stocks to the upside. So, even though you might think the stock is going to move up after earnings, when you test it, you might see a different result, such as we see with Baidu. I mean, Baidu is a pretty big player in China, so you would think that, hey, they're probably going to have decent earnings the majority of the time, and therefore I would want to be long that particular stock. But if you're looking at this chart or possibly some of the results for this bearish runner, I think you'll find a different setup. So, always test it so you can get some validity behind your thought process, and you might be surprised with some of the things that work a little bit differently. Baidu, we can see just the graph for the past 10 trades, our entry date, our exit date, and then the debit, and then we took a loss on this one particular trade there. 90% win rate, 8.72 profit factor, or the plus $1,900 profit over time. And then this is just another backtest summary that I wanted to show you within the platform. So I ran a full backtest on the Baidu earnings using it as a bearish runner. And we can see, using one of those, so using the Q3 example, we got into the trade on 11/17 and we exited on 11/19. But you can see we actually bought the March 19th $135 put, and then we actually bought it for $822. A couple days later, we got out for $10.95. And you can see the stock price here. It went from 144 to 136 over a 2-day span. And here's your daily chart. So when you do the earnings backtest, this is your your daily chart that you would look at during the backtest when you're viewing that actual results from that particular trade. Again, we can see trade entry date would be here. Stock started selling off, and then we got out of our option here on this date. Most optimal time frame for Baidu was to enter after the earnings announcement and to get out 10 days after, 10 trading days after. And I briefly went over this earlier, but again, that's something to make a good note of, is that, you have access to the Delphian platform. We do a lot of the legwork with a lot of these trades to kind of give you the symbols, give you the ideas, do the back test for you and show you the results. And then what you can do with that is you can trade that and come up with, a good system like what Sid here did with some results and things like that. Or you can take those and then further back test them or further optimize the trades into your own type of strategy if there's ways that you think you can make it better. And again, you might be able to find different scenarios where you can make some of these trades better, and you might find some that you didn't. So it's always good to try to put in some of your own ideas, use those secondary indicators like was mentioned earlier to see if that will help those trade results. But you can always optimize those trades using Delphian. So we do a lot of the legwork, but we give that to you, and you can still kind of perform some other analysis on your own also. These are just basically set on a basket of different criteria or rules that we've deemed appropriate for the masses, if you will. But again, they might not be suitable for everybody. So if there's something in there that might match you better, please test that out. Again, higher profit targets, tighter stop losses using a different selection model, rolling trades out. You can do some type of rolling trades if you wanted to do that. Not really going to happen more so with these earnings trades because they are a short time window. However, it might be optimal on some other strategies if you're going to be looking at that. Looks like we might have some questions coming in, Josh. Can you, I don't know how to do those.
I didn't see any.
I see a raised hand. Dave raised a hand, and I think somebody else did.
I don't see that.
Okay. All right. If you have a question, Dave, or somebody else raise their hand, please try to put that in that Q&A and see if we can get the question answered that way. If you're raising your hand to give me a high five, I can give you a high five back. So for the bearish runner, not as many trades again for this particular set. 17 potential trades for Q4 had a winning percentage between 80 to 89%, and 11 between 90 to 100%. Same scenario with the one before. Make sure you're using the trading days as part of your account. Get in after the earnings announcement. Always use those limit orders. 25% profit. Again, once I get filled on these trades, I go right in there and I put that 25% profit exit, and I put it in there good to cancel. Definitely many times have I kind of walked away, come back, or got to fill the next day for a trade that I completely just forgot I had in there, or I just wasn't watching that particular stock move and it had a big move. So, thankful that I did have that order in there ready to roll, because a lot of times you might see a big spike up and then you might see some selling pressure after that, or vice versa on the downside. So having those orders in ahead of time, it might cost me a big gap up. It might cost me some of that profit on a big gap up, but it's just, I think it's a little more prudent trading wise for me to have those orders in and ready to go so I don't miss a trade. And 20 days might not be the optimal for all the symbols. Baidu, it was to exit 10 days after. So that's all I had for that one. The main takeaway that I have is, we're going to have all these different plans out for everybody to be looking at. So you can kind of do the Q4 2020 plan on your own for the earnings. But as it was mentioned before, there's definitely some key takeaways that we want to make sure we're watching out for. The earnings date changing. We at Delphian, we can't control those earnings dates changing. So if Facebook says their earnings are going to be in a couple days, and then next thing you know, they have to go speak in front of Congress or to Senate or whatever, they might change their earnings date based on that coming about. So if that happens, we can't control that. So like Sotir had mentioned, that was one of the harder things to handle last quarter, and I had a tough time doing it as well. But just try to get in there and look at some things ahead of time that's coming out, over the next couple of weeks. Make some notes of them. See if you can use another source to verify, what you're looking at with the earnings announcement, and then just be prepared, be nimble. Make sure you're confirming those dates because they can change, and you don't want to be in a trade that the earnings date had changed on, because that can completely change the outcome of the actual trade. Those earnings dates, and then just having a trading plan, like we mentioned before, even with the long calls, long puts, obviously with the iron butterflies, have a plan. Delphian kind of gives you the plan, the trade that you're going to do with the potential mid price of the option or the mid price of the spread. But make sure you know how much you're willing to pay for the trade. Don't exceed that amount. Have the plan in of what you're going to do when certain things happen. I usually write mine down so I kind of can look at it and know what I'm doing. But just make sure you have the plan, because again, once you're up a bunch of money, or if you're down a bunch of money, sometimes following those plans, if it's just in your head, is a little more difficult, because that adrenaline's going. So if you have those plans ahead of time, it's much easier. And then last quarter we didn't really keep a tracker within the virtual portfolio. It was a little more difficult than I anticipated. But for this Q4, I'm going to try to keep a tracker within the virtual portfolio for all of the different segments of these earnings trades that we have. So if I do that, then that will be available for anyone on this call or any of our members to look at and to kind of see what's happening with the virtual portfolio based on that particular plan. Sabine did a great job last quarter doing that, and it is a lot of work. So again, I want to thank him for doing that. But I'm going to try or attempt to do that moving forward, so we'll be able to keep that information for everyone to look at. And I think that's all that I have. If anybody has any questions, feel free, please. And then I think we might be looking to go. Josh will be going on the plan review. We have the plan set up. Go ahead.
No, I couldn't hear you. you turn away or something. I don't know.
Sorry. I did turn away to look at I looked at my notes, but yeah, I was going to say that's all I had. If nobody has any questions.
Yeah, I got to go through the earnings plan real quick.
Yeah, no, Josh will be going through the earnings plan, but he'll have our emails up and I think our contact numbers as well. So feel free to email me or email Josh if you have any questions, or if you want us to show you some of the stuff that we went over, we can show it to you live, in our platforms and how we come up with it, how we back tested it, use the screener, things like that. Feel free to contact us, and I appreciate your time, everyone. Thank you.